The fire crackles softly as shadows dance on the stone walls around you. The world outside is quiet now. You've returned to that timeless space where the stories of the past drift like smoke through still air, waiting to be heard once more. Welcome back to Sleepy Saga Histories. Tonight, let us walk slowly through the Roman night. Let us stand beside the flickering torchlight, where a legionnaire lies restless, the cold earth beneath him and the weight of tomorrow pressing gently on his chest. Let us listen as his memories stir of home, of duty, of laughter and fear on the night before battle. Close your eyes, feel the stillness of the ancient world settle around you. The fire's glow is soft now. The voice of history begins. There was no moon tonight, only the distant murmur of tents shifting in the wind, and the faint metallic clink of armour resting on wooden frames. The Roman camp stretched wide over the valley floor, lines of tents aligned with practiced precision. Torches glowed like watchful eyes, their flames flickering low as if whispering secrets in the dark. Decimus of Rome, soldier of the 12th Legion, lay on his back atop a folded woolen cloak, staring at the fraying fabric of his tent ceiling. He did not sleep. Few did on nights like this. The air was thick with quiet tension, and though the men spoke little, the silence was a heavy thing, stitched with unspoken fears. Tomorrow they would march to the edge of the world, or at least to the edge of the known world, beyond the last Roman road, past the lands marked only by rumour and enemy banners. Decimus exhaled slowly, as if trying not to disturb the silence. His breath was warm against the cooling air, and he closed his eyes, not in sleep, but in retreat. And there, behind his eyelids, the past began to take shape. He was a boy again, racing barefoot through the vineyards of his father's farm in Latium. The hills rolled green and golden, the leaves sticky with summer sap. His mother's voice called from the olive grove behind him, sharp and warm, warning him not to stain his tunic. He'd ignored her as always. He remembered how the grapes smelled when crushed underfoot, how the dirt clung to his legs, how his brother Lucius had chased him with a branch like a sword, and how they both fell laughing beneath the vines, the sun burning bronze halos into their tangled hair. The memory was soft, almost too soft to hold. He opened his eyes again. The tent was still there, the ground still cold, the smell of oiled leather and sweat still strong. The fire outside hissed as it was fed. Someone tossed in a strip of dried wood, and the scent of resin drifted briefly under the canvas. From a few tents down, a low voice hummed. It was an old marching song. Nothing cheerful, just a rhythm to keep one's thoughts in check. Decimus listened. He didn't recognize the voice, but the tune was familiar. He let it carry him back, not to boyhood, but to his first year with the Legion. The training fields at Capua, the biting wind that came off the sea in winter, the centurion's voice roaring until his throat cracked. Shields too large for new arms, sand in every crevice of every part of the body. He'd cried once, only once. The others had too, though none admitted it. He remembered the first time he stood in formation. His heart had raced so hard he thought others could hear it, but his hands held steady. They had been taught well. Roman discipline was not a gentle tutor. He had learned to wait, to march, to strike, and to fear nothing but shame. Now, all these years later, he had lost count of the battles, hills conquered, villages burned, rivers crossed in armour, friends buried beside roads with no names, and yet tonight felt different. Perhaps it was the land, this strange province, the silence of the forests, the way the wind carried no bird song. Or perhaps it was the enemy, unseen but near, sleeping as he did, if they slept at all. His hand strayed toward his gladius beside him. He did not touch it. He did not need to. Its weight had shaped the muscles of his arm. He could draw it blind in rain and snow in pitch dark. Someone coughed in the next tent over. He recognized the sound. Marcus, a boy barely older than his own son would have been, eager, quiet, carried a carving of Fortuna in his pouch, kissed it each morning. He always offered Decimus the first bite of his rations, though protocol didn't require it. Decimus liked him. He hoped Marcus would live through tomorrow. He hoped he would too. The night deepened. A soft wind stirred the fabric of the tent, and for a moment it was as if the whole camp sighed together. Soldiers dreaming, whispering, shifting in their sleep or their wakefulness. Beyond the palisade, torches glowed in fixed positions, and the murmur of distant sentries, speaking in hushed Latin, rose and fell like the tide. Decimus turned on his side. The ground beneath him was hard but familiar, better than the muddy ditches of Germania or the frozen banks of the Danube. He closed his eyes again. This time the memories were darker. The ambush in the mountain pass, snow falling heavy, the clash of iron on iron echoing off stone, the sound of men screaming in languages he did not know, the smell of blood and pine needles, his shield split, his comrade Lucan crushed beneath a falling rock. He had screamed for hours, his legs pinned until silence took him. Decimus had wanted to die that day, but the standard still stood, and he had orders. So he marched on. But there were better memories too. A quiet night in Gaul. Wine passed between tents. Songs sung softly in Latin and Greek, and half-mocking tribal tongues. A Gaulish girl with dark eyes who gave him bread and kissed his cheek before he left her village behind. Her name was lost to time, but the memory lived, tucked in the quiet spaces between sword strikes and shouted commands. He breathed deeply. Outside, the sky was beginning to pale. Soon the camp would stir, fires would be stoked, armour fastened, the horns would sound. But not yet, for now there was still time to remember, to wander the paths of the mind before battle made them irrelevant. Decimus let the memories come, unhurried and unfiltered, as the first bird called from some hidden tree beyond the walls. He knew this would be the last moment of peace for a long time. So he held on to it, with the strength of a soldier who knew too well how quickly peace was spent. The sky was turning grey now, neither night nor morning, but that strange, quiet in-between, where dreams cling like mist to the waking mind. Decimus sat up slowly. His joints protested, his back, his knees, his neck. He had grown used to pain. A soldier who wakes without it is a rare man indeed. He reached for his cloak and wrapped it tighter over his shoulders, then listened. The camp was still mostly silent, only the rustling of a tent flap, a soft cough, the faint pop of a torch flaring in the damp air. The wind had shifted, bringing with it the scent of earth and pine. Somewhere, a mule brayed, long and low. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes, though he had barely slept at all. Tonight was the same as every night before battle, restless, slow, heavy with memory. But this morning something felt different. Not in the land or the sky, but inside him. A stillness, a clarity. He didn't think of death, not directly, but he thought of what might never be seen again. His mind drifted once more, unbidden to Rome. Not the Rome of emperors and senators, but the Rome of streets and smells, of sandals slapping wet stone, and bread ovens hissing in the heat. His street, his small home near the Aventine Hill. The fig tree that bent slightly toward the alley, like it was listening. He could see his wife's face, Alia. She'd had worry in her eyes the day he left, but she had smiled anyway. She always smiled when she needed to be strong. That was her way. She'd given him her hand and tucked something into his palm, a tiny linen scrap scented with lavender. He still carried it. It was folded in the pouch at his side, protected from blood and rain and fire. On quiet nights, he would take it out, breathe in the scent and close his eyes. He didn't take it out now. Some things were too precious for mornings like this. The sound of footsteps approached his tent, slow, deliberate. A shadow stretched across the entrance. "Decimus," a voice whispered. "You awake?" It was Gaius, his closest friend, a grizzled veteran with a scar that carved down his cheek like a channel through dry earth. They'd served together for years, in Pannonia, in Dacia, across the frozen frontiers where breath turned to ice. "Aye," Decimus answered. Gaius ducked into the tent, his face half lit by the pale light. "Can't sleep," he muttered, rubbing his hands together. "Dreamt of the sea again." Decimus nodded. Gaius sat on the edge of the folded cloak beside him, groaning softly as his knees bent. "Strange," Gaius said. "I've never even seen the sea." They both chuckled, not because it was funny, but because it was human. They sat like that for a while, not speaking, not needing to. The silence between old soldiers is a language all its own. After some time, Gaius spoke again. "You think we'll win?" Decimus didn't answer right away. He thought of the terrain ahead, of the numbers they'd been given, of the commanders, the supply wagons, the state of morale. "I think we'll survive," he said. "Some of us." Gaius grunted in agreement. Better than nothing. Outside, the horns began to sound, soft and low at first, like a beast stirring in its sleep. Then clearer, longer. The morning had begun. All around the camp, life returned to motion. Soldiers stirred from tents, some still blinking against the pale sky, others already fastening straps, donning their segmentata armour, piece by piece, with practised motions. Fires were stoked again, bringing warmth to numb hands. Bread was shared. A few curses were muttered as boots were tugged over sore feet. The calm was ending. Decimus stood. He stretched his back and rolled his shoulders. His armour lay beside the tent wall, clean and silent. He began dressing slowly. First the tunic, rough wool, worn thin. Then the leather straps across his chest, tightened with care. The lorica segmentata followed, its plates cool against his skin, clinking softly like wind chimes dulled by age. Each piece had a place, each movement a ritual. He secured his belt and checked the gladius, polished the night before, sharp enough to sever a thought. Then his helmet. He turned it over in his hands. The crest was plain like most legionaries, no decoration. Just steel, pitted and dependable. He put it on. Gaius had finished dressing too. He adjusted his sword and gave Decimus a nod. They stepped out into the morning light. The camp was awake now, alive with purpose. Officers shouted commands. Auxiliary archers prepared bundles of arrows. A group of engineers loaded the last of the ballistae onto wooden carts. Horses stamped impatiently near the rear gate, their breath steaming in the cold air. But there was no panic, no frantic motion. This was the Roman machine, waking for war. A centurion marched down the row with a vine staff in hand, barking orders. "Double line at the southern perimeter. Equipment secured. No stragglers." Decimus and Gaius joined their cohort, as it assembled near the standard. Men stood shoulder to shoulder, faces blank or steeled or quietly praying. No one spoke of fear, but it moved among them like smoke. The standard bearer raised the eagle high. Its golden wings caught the morning light and shimmered faintly. All eyes lifted. There was something sacred about the eagle. It wasn't just wood and metal. It was Rome, the soul of the legion, the symbol of every oath sworn, every battle won, every mile marched from the Mediterranean to the edge of the unknown. Decimus felt his chest tighten, not with dread, not even pride, but with memory, with the weight of having walked so far, only to arrive again at the edge of fate. He looked out over the palisade walls. The land ahead was still misted, trees stretching like fingers through the low fog. Somewhere out there, the enemy waited. They would have their own rituals, their own fears, their own hopes. But for now, this moment belonged to Rome. And as the horns called again, louder now, the first step toward the battlefield was taken. With it, 1,000 thoughts were silenced. Only duty remained. The column began to move, not all at once, but slowly, like a river, easing past its banks. Orders rippled down the line from centurion to optio to legionary, and soon the shuffle of feet blended into a steady rhythm. Dust rose behind them. Armour clinked, leather creaked. Decimus felt the familiar weight of his pack settling into his shoulders, the gladius tapping lightly against his thigh with each step. The world narrowed to the path in front of him, the man ahead, the breath in his lungs. There was no sound from the enemy, not yet. Just the breathing of the legion, thousands of breaths, calm, slow and deep, like the pulse of the land itself. They marched. Each footfall was a memory. He thought of his first march, when he was barely more than a boy. The straps had chafed, the sun had burned, and he had feared every shadow. He had learned quickly that fear was like hunger. It came in waves, then passed. It could be fed, or it could be faced. Today it was just a companion, no more or less powerful than his sword. The road ahead curved past a stand of cypress trees. Thin and tall, they swayed gently in the wind, their green-black needles brushing the sky. Beyond them, the land opened into a shallow valley, where low fog still clung to the fields. That was where the scouts said the enemy waited. Not close yet, but not far. The centurion called for a halt. One short blast of the horn, then a hand raised high. The line stopped as one. Decimus took a knee. Beside him, Gaius adjusted his helmet, his expression unreadable beneath the steel. Around them, 100 men stood, or crouched, or rested against their shields. A short pause, not a break, just a breath before the plunge. It was a Roman tradition, this moment. A silence before the storm. Not ritualized, not spoken aloud, but lived. Time to think, to feel, to settle into what must come. No speeches, no fanfare, just stillness. Decimus looked to the east. The sun was rising now, low and golden. It burned through the mist like a torch through gauze. The light hit the valley in broken bands, catching on shields, on helmets, on spears held upright like tall reeds. The valley looked peaceful. He knew better. He leaned back against a rock and closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Sleep would not come, not real sleep, but perhaps something like it. He slowed his breath, counted each exhale, let his thoughts drift, not forward, but backward, into memory again. He was in his father's vineyard, south of the Tiber. The rows stretched long and green, with fat grapes heavy on the vines. His father's voice carried on the breeze, calling instructions to workers, laughing. Decimus was a child again, chasing a lizard through the dust, barefoot and happy. The sun had been warm, not harsh. He opened his eyes, back to the field, back to the weight of armour and war, but for a moment he had tasted peace. The horn sounded again. This time it was longer, the kind that says, "Prepare." That stirs muscle and bone into readiness. Decimus stood. He adjusted his cloak, tied it at the shoulder with the practised tug of years. The chill of morning had not lifted entirely, but sweat had already begun to form beneath his armour. He gripped his shield, tested the strap, felt its weight in his left hand. The wood was scarred and dented from a dozen fights before. He had carved a small mark into its back, near the centre grip, a symbol only he understood. It reminded him who he was. The officers moved along the line speaking quietly, not orders now, but reminders, encouragement. One clapped Decimus on the shoulder and said, "Stand firm, brother." Another offered water to the younger recruits, who were sweating with nerves more than heat. There was kindness, even here. Rome was harsh, often cruel, but among her soldiers there was something different, something forged in the dust and the fire and the mud, brotherhood, not born from blood, but from battle, from shared sleep and shared scars, from silence and survival. Then movement ahead. A scout galloped back from the front, dust trailing like smoke behind his horse. He pulled up hard at the centurion's position, spoke quickly, gesturing to the eastern rise. The enemy had begun to move. The centurion nodded, passed the word down. "Shields up!" The cry echoed through the ranks. Thousands of arms lifted as one. The sound of wood and metal coming together was like a rolling thunder, not violent but powerful, measured, rhythmic. Decimus felt his body respond. No time to think now, only the flow, the training, the breathing. They advanced in formation, not fast, not dramatic, just a steady wall of men and will, pushing forward one step at a time. Shields locked, gladi at the ready. The Roman tortoise, the iron tide, the steady weight of empire moving with silent purpose. The sky was brighter now, but still cold. Decimus glanced sideways. Gaius was beside him. Their eyes met briefly. No words, just a nod. Then the sound of horns across the valley. The enemy's call. Different from Rome's, shrill, wilder, higher in pitch like an animal's cry. It raised hairs, stirred fear. But they kept walking, because that's what Romans did. They walked into the noise. He felt time bend, not break, but stretch, slow, like a dream underwater. Each moment held too long, then passed too quickly. A footstep, a breath, a thought. He remembered his daughter's laugh. He remembered the first time he held a sword. He remembered the ache of longing and the joy of survival. The valley was narrowing now, the distance closing. Soon the silence would break, and the dream would end. The wind shifted, not harsh, just a breeze moving from the east, carrying with it a faint scent of wet earth and crushed grass, the kind of smell that came before a storm, or a battle. Decimus kept his eyes forward. The ground was uneven here, patches of rock, tufts of stubborn weeds, furrows left by animals, or perhaps by earlier scouts. He stepped carefully, each movement measured. There was a kind of reverence in the quiet. This place would soon carry the weight of history and blood. He tightened the strap on his helmet. Not because it was loose, but because it gave his hands something to do. A ritual. Every soldier had them. Small movements to distract the mind. One twisted his ring before every engagement. Another tapped twice on his shield. Decimus had once laughed at such things. Now he understood. The mind needed anchors. Small gestures to say, I am still here, I am still myself. The ranks slowed again. Not a full halt, just a soft easing, as if the entire formation sensed they were close, closer than they had been before. The enemy was no longer a concept now. They were here. Just beyond the rise, you could feel it. Not see them, not yet, but feel them. A tension in the air like the moment before a thunderclap. Decimus's breath was steady, not fast, not panicked, just present, in and out. He thought again of his daughter, of the way she used to grip his finger with her entire hand, as if she could hold the world that way. He wondered where she was now, if she was sleeping, if she dreamed of her father standing in a field far from home. He hoped not. Let her dream of flowers and games and sunlight, not this. The centurion moved to the front, raised his hand. Every man stopped. There was no need to speak. This was the final moment, the stillness before they stepped beyond the threshold, from the world of before into the world of after. Once they moved forward again, it would begin. There would be no more time for thought, only reaction. A bird flew overhead. Its wings caught the light, glinting silver, then gone again. It vanished into the distance. Free. Decimus envied it. Not because he wanted to flee, but because the bird had no need to understand what was coming. He heard something then. A sound low and dull rising through the earth more than the air. A drum, perhaps, or the pounding of feet. It came from ahead, just over the hill. The enemy preparing. A different rhythm. Foreign. It did not match the Roman cadence. It was looser, wilder, like a heartbeat with no order. It made his stomach twist, not in fear, but in recognition. The clash was near. He shifted his weight slightly, raising his shield. There was no signal, only instinct. Around him others did the same. They formed tighter now, shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping like the plates of a tortoise shell. The gladi came out, not swung, not raised, just held, ready. There was a moment right then when Decimus realised something. He wasn't afraid, not in the way he used to be. He had feared death once, but not now, because death was not a stranger anymore. It had walked beside him, had passed him by, had claimed others but left him standing. He did not welcome it, but he did not run from it either. He had made peace with the cost, and that was something Rome had taught him. Then movement. Figures appeared at the crest of the hill, dark shapes against the pale sky. First just a few, then many. Shields, spears, banners. Not Romans, foreign silhouettes, angular, rough, less ordered. The enemy. They had arrived, and they were watching too. Both sides stood, facing one another, still separated by the breadth of the valley. It was strange how quiet it still was. No screaming, no charge, just the weight of knowing. Each army sizing the other up like beasts in the wild, waiting to see who would flinch, who would blink, who would move first. Decimus exhaled slowly. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. He was not the strongest man in the line, not the fastest, but he was steady. And he knew that today, as always, Rome did not need heroes. It needed shields held firm, lines unbroken, discipline. That was the Roman advantage. The centurion stepped forward, raised his blade. A single simple command followed. Advance, and they did. The formation surged forward, not with chaos, but with unity. Each step deliberate, shields tight, swords low, boots pounding in time. It was like the earth itself was moving beneath them. Not a mob, but a force, a machine of flesh and will. Decimus kept his eyes ahead. He did not look at the faces across the field. He looked at the space between, the distance closing with every step. The silence grew thinner. The moments stretched, pulled taut like a bowstring. Then, the charge. The enemy let out a scream, wild, feral, high-pitched, not the shout of men, but something older. It rolled down the slope toward them, and with it came a flurry of movement, shields raised, weapons lifted, bodies rushing. Decimus did not flinch. He did not yell back. He just moved. One step, then another. Then, contact. He felt the jolt in his shield as the first impact landed. A body slammed into him, raw and fast. He held his ground. His right arm lashed forward, sword stabbing in the practiced rhythm. He did not look at the face. He moved by muscle memory. Strike, brace, shield, strike. Time vanished. The world became inches wide. He heard nothing now. Not really. Not the screams, not the metal, not even his breath. Only flashes, motion and shadow, and blood and sun. He moved forward, always forward, because that was what they had trained him to do. Because that was what Rome demanded. He felt pain, but it was distant. A scrape on his arm, a bruise beneath the ribs, nothing deep. He kept moving. The line was holding. The enemy was pushing hard, but not breaking the formation. Not yet. Decimus felt the shield of Gaius brush against his own. That meant they were still tight, still together. That was what mattered. He let out a sound, not a roar, but a breath through clenched teeth. And he struck again. The weight of the moment was gone now. There was only the rhythm, the pulse, the dream. There is a moment in every battle when time collapses. The field narrows into a tunnel, a blur of shields and faces and muscle. Each second stretches and vanishes at once. Decimus moved through that tunnel like a man underwater. His ears rang, his arms ached, his legs moved without asking, but his mind drifted. He was still fighting, still locked in the push and pull of sword and shield, but in the soft corners of his thoughts he was no longer on the battlefield. He was back in the fields, beyond Ostia, where the wheat grew high and gold. He remembered his mother calling him home from the road, her voice sweet and stern. He remembered stealing figs from the merchant's cart. He remembered the feel of dirt beneath his fingernails and the warm sting of the sun on his back. And somewhere inside he smiled. Even now, in this chaos, that warmth returned to him. The shield shifted again. Another blow. He twisted, countered, pressed forward. A groan as someone fell beside him. The rhythm held. The Roman line did not scatter. They did not run. They did not break. They absorbed the strike like a wall of oak, scarred and weathered, but unmoving. Decimus found a new target. A tall man with hair wild and dark, swinging a curved blade with both hands. Their eyes met only briefly, and in that flash there was no hatred, only necessity. The man struck. Decimus blocked, responded. Steel met bone. The man fell. And just like that, the space before him was empty again. He took a single breath, just one, then stepped forward. There was no time to mourn, no room for guilt or reflection. The battle had no use for feelings, only movement, only discipline, only Rome. To his left, someone stumbled, Marcus maybe, or Felix, he couldn't tell. Decimus reached out, grabbed his arm, yanked him back into place. No words were exchanged, just a nod. They moved again. The enemy had spirit, he could feel it. They fought hard with desperation and fury, but fury without form was no match for Roman order. The more the battle dragged, the more their line bent and sagged. It would not be long now, not if they held. Then a horn, high, clear, familiar, the signal. flank manoeuvre, third cohort advancing. The tide was turning. Decimus knew it. He could feel it in the way the enemy pressed. Harder now, less organised, less certain. He saw it in their eyes, the fear creeping in, the momentum shifting. They were faltering. And Rome did not falter. There was blood on his hand. He did not know whose. He wiped it on his tunic, glanced to the centurion ahead. The man stood firm, face hard, sword red. They would push now. One more surge, one final shove to break the line. Decimus felt it coming. A thought whispered through him then. Not a memory, not a fear. A single truth. If I die here, I die Roman. Not as a farmer, not as a boy chasing goats in the fields, but as a piece of something eternal. A stone in a wall that would not fall. A name remembered, not because it was famous, but because it was faithful. The final charge began. No trumpet this time, just movement. Just men stepping forward, shields raised, teeth clenched. Just purpose. He moved with them, shoulder to shoulder, sword gripped tight. The world narrowed again. He did not hear the clash. He did not hear the scream. Only the breath. In, outside, strike, brace, step, repeat. Then a break, not a full rout, not yet. But the enemy's front cracked open like old timber. Men turned, some shouted, some fled. The formation split. And through it, the Roman wedge surged. Decimus followed the point. He no longer thought. He no longer remembered. He only moved, past the wounded, past the broken line, through the fading fog of fear. Time returned slowly. The sound first, distant calls, commands shouted, the metallic ring of retreating feet. Then the smell, sweat, blood, churned earth, burning torches. Then the light, sun breaking through cloud and smoke, casting long shadows on the ruined field. They had won. He stopped, still standing. His hands were trembling now, just slightly. He let them. Let the weight settle. Let the quiet return. He looked around. Men knelt. Some prayed, some wept. Some stood motionless, staring at nothing. Not in shock, but in reflection. It was always like this after battle. Not joy, not pride. Just silence. Like the whole world was catching its breath. He did not smile. He did not cheer. He just closed his eyes and let himself drift. He did not remember being led back to camp. Only the dust of the road beneath his sandals, the weight of his pack slung over one shoulder, and the dull ache in every muscle. The camp walls loomed ahead like old friends, rough timber, lashed and layered, and the scent of pine sap clinging to the air. The gates opened slowly. He entered with the others, wordless, tired, whole. The standards still flew overhead. Inside, the familiar rhythm resumed. Soldiers cleaned their weapons in silence. Some limped. Some shared looks but said nothing. The Medici moved between them, tending wounds with steady hands and sour wine. There were no songs, no celebrations. That would come later. Tonight was for breathing. He sat at the edge of his tent and removed his armour, one buckle at a time. Larica segmentata, gladius, pugio, belt, cloak. The metal clinked softly as it was placed beside him. Sweat stained his tunic. Dried blood clung to the creases of his hands. He stared at them for a moment, calloused and red, lined with dirt, and did not flinch. There was nothing shocking in them anymore, nothing new. He washed at the basin near the latrines. Cold water, cold stone. He let it run down his neck and over his shoulders, cooling the fire still burning inside him. Another legionary passed and nodded. He nodded back. They did not speak. They did not need to. Later they gathered near the fire. Just a few. Marcus, old Lucius, young Sylvanus with the scar that hadn't quite healed. They shared salted pork, bread, a little watered wine. The fire crackled low, casting shadows along the canvas and flickering in tired eyes. Lucius told a story about a goat that had once kicked a centurion into a ditch. It wasn't funny, but they laughed anyway, because it wasn't about the story. It was about the sound of laughter, the reminder that they were still men. Sylvanus asked if anyone had seen what happened to Gaius. No one had. The name hung in the air. No one filled the silence. They drank quietly. Let the fire pop. Let the embers dance. Someone hummed a tune from the north. Old, slow, wordless. Decimus closed his eyes and listened. Not to the tune, but to what it carried. Warmth, home, memory, and loss all woven together like threads of wool. He remembered his sister's wedding. The song they had sung then was not so different. Software gentle, carried by voices that would never see this camp. When the fire faded and the cold crept in, they returned to their tents one by one. Decimus lingered. Sitting alone beside the coals, he watched them dim, watched the smoke trail upward into the stars, then rose and walked. The camp at night was quiet, but not still. Guards moved at the palisade. A mule brayed in the distance. Somewhere, a soldier whispered prayers to the gods of war, asking for peace, or victory, or not to be forgotten. He walked without direction. Past the tents, past the stables, down toward the far edge where the torches burned low, and there, beneath the stars, he stopped. He looked up. The sky was vast, moonless, but littered with stars like silver dust on a dark velvet. He had seen it before, from different lands, different fields, but tonight it felt heavier, more sacred, because he was still alive to see it. He thought of the men who had fallen. He did not cry, he did not kneel, but he remembered. Every name he could. He whispered them one after the other, until his voice faded into the cold. And then he stood there for a long time, not thinking, not hoping, just being. When at last he returned to his tent, the camp had gone quiet. The fire was out, the wind low, the stars distant and steady. He lay on the simple straw mattress, pulled the woolen blanket over his chest, and closed his eyes. And sleep did not rush him. It came slow, as it always did, slipping through the cracks of memory and muscle. In that half-waking moment, he dreamed again, but not of war, not of blood or shields or cries. He dreamed of his mother's bread baking in the oven, the smell of thyme and ash. He dreamed of a child's laughter echoing across the fields. He dreamed of hands, not rough with sword work, but soft with love, brushing his cheek. The battle was over. Tomorrow would come, but tonight he rested, and Rome, eternal and silent, rested with him.